students were coming into my classrooms more and more as time moved on with less and less understanding about how racism works in society's institutions as a whole. They had a belief that I think was well reinforced by mass media and by curriculums, that racism was just a personal attitude, right? You're a racist, you have personal negative beliefs about another group of people. And that's not what drives most of the discrimination and most of the significant disadvantages. So we had a schism, right? People would say, is this individual a racist, or what did he or she say that was racist? But then people would put up all these disparities, right? Say, the wealth gap is 10 to 1, and the infant mortality rate is significant, right? The schools are funded differently. Their performance in schools, dropout rates. And it's almost as if personal beliefs are driving these gaps. And if it's not that, then it must be the people's behavior. So there was this sense of a gap in understanding how to connect why these outcomes could be so profoundly disparate across race between, say, black and white, and at the same time think that all that we have in terms of discrimination is just personal behavior. So I wanted to really interrogate that with the hopes of having a much more productive and informed conversation and hopefully change.
One of my key takeaways from the book is that you describe systemic racism as racism hiding in plain sight. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we want to talk about that in the abstract or if we want to get into a specific case. Maybe we go a little bit deeper on Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
But how is it that the systemic element of racism makes it possible for us to not see what's really happening?
Yeah. That, systems are very powerful because they organize society in such a way that the outcomes appear natural, even when the outcomes are the opposite of what the purpose of the system says. So we say we're a democratic system. We say we're an egalitarian society. You ask most people, whites, 80% would say we're either racially equal or about to be. And so, those numbers are pretty high. And yet here we have all of these institutional ways that significant discrimination is going on. So because it's part of the norm, it requires that people reject everything they know about how society is organized, or at least be curiously critical in order to get at the truth of what's happening, right? And so that's one of the reasons why it can hide in plain sight. Things like disparate sentencing, right? We know black people have been sentenced longer for the same crimes. We know that they're also policed more, so they're more likely to be identified as criminals because they're constantly being surveilled and policed, right?
Of course.
And now, then I realized that this policy means that when you've been convicted of a felony, you are not eligible for any number of public services. So you can't live in public housing. You can't, avail yourself of, say, other kinds of housing support or any other, food stamps. So basically say, permanently, you are persona non grata, which of course flies in the face of the point of sentencing. You're supposed to be a citizen when you get out. But what happens is, because there's such a high poverty rate among African Americans, much higher than whites, something like children, 38% of them are going to be poor if they're black, only 5% if they're white. So you have a disproportionate number of families in subsidized housing who are African American. That when their children have been policed at this level, and then they cannot come back and live at home in any kind of subsidized housing, they largely end up homeless. And that is one of the reasons why black people make up 38 to 40% of the homeless when they make up only 13% of the population. So you're seeing this interconnection, who would make that interconnection, right? That these things are unnecessary. You don't need that housing rejection in order to punish someone. They've already gotten out of jail. But what it does is it connects the housing to the homelessness, to this sort of permanent criminalization, which we're seeing now. People are upset there are all these homeless people. And then they're also more vulnerable to mental health issues, because living on the street is extremely stressful.
You make a very important point here, which is when you're released from prison, in the manner you're describing, it's not only the individual who is released who is punished.
That's right. The family.
It's the family. It's children. It could be older people. It could be parents.
That's right.
It's the family.
Right. Now you magnify that.
Much broader effect.
Much broader effect.